The moment you stop caring is the moment the game changes. Because when a narcissist realizes you're no longer emotionally hooked, that's when you see who they really are. And if you're in the process of emotionally detaching, or you're fighting the urge to go back, hit subscribe and commit to becoming unshakable. This is about reclaiming your power.
When a narcissist realizes you no longer care, the first internal shift is the collapse of their validation source. Your attention, reactions, and emotional investment once functioned as psychological fuel. Whether you were loving, upset, jealous, or trying to fix things, you were engaged. That engagement reinforced their sense of importance. It told them they mattered, that they had influence, that they could affect your emotional state. When that suddenly disappears, it creates a destabilizing void.
For someone who relies heavily on external validation to regulate self-worth, indifference feels threatening. It's not simply about losing a person, it's about losing the mirror that reflected their significance. Without your reactions, they don't receive confirmation of their desirability, power, or superiority. The silence becomes loud, your calm becomes confusing. They may replay interactions in their mind, looking for signs that you still care, because evidence of indifference challenges their internal narrative of being unforgettable. This is often experienced as a narcissistic injury. It can trigger anxiety, agitation, or an urgent need to re-establish connection. Not necessarily because they miss intimacy in a healthy way, but because the absence of validation disrupts their emotional equilibrium. When you stop feeding the dynamic, they are left alone with their own self-concept, without reinforcement. Your detachment removes their leverage. It shifts the balance of power. And in that shift, they confront something deeply uncomfortable. They are no longer the center of your emotional world. Once a narcissist realizes your care has vanished, they often try to re-engage through subtle or overt gestures, hoping to regain the emotional attention they've lost. This is usually their first line of defense against the unsettling feeling of being ignored or dismissed. They may send unexpected messages, act nostalgic, or bring up memories that previously connected you, testing whether your indifference is genuine or temporary. Every small response you give is scrutinized as proof that you might still be emotionally invested because their sense of self relies on your reactions. Love bombing can emerge as a powerful tactic at this stage. Grand gestures, sudden compliments, or excessive flattery are not necessarily sincere attempts to rebuild a relationship. They are strategic moves designed to trigger a response. They want to see if you will engage emotionally, if you will resume the dynamic where they feel dominant. The goal is to restore the flow of validation they've lost, not necessarily to reconnect in a meaningful or healthy way. Even casual comments or gestures from them are often calculated. They might mirror the behaviors or preferences that once made you feel drawn to them, subtly signaling that the old connection is available again. This creates an internal conflict for you. Part of you recognizes the manipulation, while another part might instinctively feel nostalgic or tempted. Understanding this pattern allows you to recognize that these re-engagement attempts are not about your worth or their love. They are about reclaiming control and reaffirming their ego. Once you see that clearly, you can maintain detachment and avoid being pulled back into the cycle. When indifference fails to draw a response, a narcissist may escalate to anger or intimidation as a way to regain control. This shift is not random. It is a reaction to the threat of losing influence over someone they once dominated emotionally. Anger becomes a tool to provoke a reaction, to break the calm you've established, and to remind you that they still hold power, or at least that they want you to think they do. The intensity can take many forms, from passive-aggressive remarks and criticism to overt displays of frustration or hostility, all designed to unsettle you and elicit an emotional response. This escalation is often accompanied by attempts to rewrite events or interactions to cast themselves in a favorable light. They may accuse you of being cold, unfair, or ungrateful, turning the situation around so that you feel guilty or defensive. By doing so, They hope to destabilize your sense of clarity and regain the emotional leverage that has been lost. The goal is always the same: to reassert influence and regain access to the validation that your detachment has cut off. The underlying mechanism is psychological. The narcissist experiences a narcissistic injury, a deep wound to their ego, when someone they relied on for affirmation no longer reacts. Anger and intimidation serve as defense mechanisms to protect their fragile self-image. Recognizing these behaviors as strategies rather than personal attacks allows you to maintain emotional detachment. Understanding that their escalation is about their ego, not your actions, is critical for maintaining power and calm in the face of their attempts to provoke you. When they realize that anger and intimidation aren't working, a narcissist often turns to provocation through jealousy or competition. This is a calculated move designed to test whether you still care, whether your indifference can be disrupted. They might flaunt new relationships, post attention-seeking content on social media, or mention admirers in conversation. The goal isn't to make themselves happy, it's to elicit a reaction from you. If you show any sign of jealousy, curiosity, or concern, it confirms that they still have power over your emotions. This tactic plays on the same psychological principle as the earlier manipulations. They are attempting to reclaim validation. Seeing you react restores the sense of control they lost when you detached. Even if the provocation seems superficial, it is carefully targeted. They know which aspects of your personality or desires are likely to elicit a response, and they exploit them intentionally. Your calm, measured reaction, or lack thereof, becomes the ultimate test of whether their influence remains. For the narcissist, failure to provoke is disorienting. Their usual methods of control no longer work, leaving them frustrated, anxious, and uncertain. They may cycle between subtle attempts to rekindle attention and more obvious displays of bravado, hoping that eventually you will engage. Understanding this pattern empowers you to maintain composure. Indifference is a powerful tool. By refusing to react, you continue to remove their emotional leverage. Recognizing that jealousy and competition tactics are manipulations rather than genuine signals of desire helps you preserve clarity and emotional sovereignty. When a narcissist fails to regain your attention through love bombing, provocation, or attempts at jealousy, they often resort to rewriting the narrative to protect their fragile ego. They may distort past events, exaggerate your mistakes, or recast themselves as the victim, creating a version of reality that justifies their behavior and preserves their self-image. This is not about truth, it's about control. By reshaping the story, they attempt to regain influence over how you feel and how others perceive the situation. This rewriting serves multiple purposes. First, it attempts to destabilize you emotionally. If you start doubting your memories or your perception of past interactions, you become more malleable. Second, it reassures the narcissist's ego. If they can convince you, or even just themselves, that they are justified and blameless, it mitigates the sting of rejection or indifference. Third, it signals to others that they are still in control, preserving their status and reputation as someone admired or desired. For you, this manipulation can feel confusing and destabilizing, especially if it contradicts your lived experience. Recognizing it for what it is, a self-protective tactic, not an accurate reflection of reality, is crucial. The more detached and emotionally grounded you remain, the less effective this strategy becomes. By refusing to accept the distorted narrative, you maintain your clarity and protect your sense of reality, further solidifying the power shift away from them and back into your hands. When the narcissist realizes your indifference is real and persistent, they often seek new sources of validation to replace the one they've lost, what is sometimes called finding new supply. This isn't necessarily about romantic love or genuine connection. It's about quickly restoring their ego through attention, admiration, or desire from someone else. They may pursue someone new aggressively, flirt openly, or highlight new attachments publicly, all to demonstrate that they remain desirable and in control. This behavior serves a psychological purpose. Losing your emotional investment creates a void in their sense of self-worth. By securing a new source of attention, they attempt to fill that void and reaffirm their significance. The faster they find this replacement, the less time they have to sit with the discomfort of being irrelevant. They are, in essence, patching the gap in their ego before it grows too large to manage. For those on the receiving end, this can feel alarming or even triggering. You may question whether you were truly replaced or whether their new pursuit diminishes your own value. Understanding the motive behind their actions shifts perspective. It isn't about your worth or desirability. It's about their need to restore ego and control. Recognizing this helps you maintain detachment, clarity, and emotional safety. Your indifference forces them to confront a reality they are uncomfortable with, that your emotional energy is no longer theirs to manipulate, and finding new supply is their predictable, ego-driven attempt to regain balance. Beneath all the manipulations, the anger, and the attempts to regain attention, what a narcissist experiences most profoundly when you stop caring is a narcissistic injury. This is the invisible wound inflicted on their ego when someone they relied on for validation no longer reacts. It isn't about heartbreak in the way most people understand it. It's about a blow to their self-image, a realization that they are not as essential or powerful as they believed. This injury can manifest as anxiety, frustration, or even obsessive thoughts about how to reclaim influence. They may replay interactions, analyze your behavior, or escalate tactics to test whether your detachment is permanent. Their self-worth is tethered to external recognition, and your indifference threatens that foundation. Without your emotional responses to feed their ego, they are forced to confront a reality they usually avoid, that they are not in control of your feelings. The pain of narcissistic injury often drives their subsequent behaviors, attempts at reconciliation, displays of superiority, provocations, or seeking new sources of validation. Each action is a response to the discomfort of realizing they can no longer reliably manipulate your emotions. For you, understanding this is liberating. You can see that their agitation, attempts at provocation, or rapid replacement with someone else isn't about you personally. It's about their own fragile self-concept being challenged. Your detachment doesn't just protect your emotional well-being. It exposes the underlying truth of their dependency on external validation, highlighting the shift in power that comes when you stop caring. Your emotional detachment is the ultimate source of power when dealing with a narcissist. While they may scramble to regain attention, manipulate narratives, provoke jealousy, or seek new supply, your calm and indifference signal that their usual tactics no longer work. This is the moment you reclaim control, not through confrontation, anger, or manipulation, but simply by refusing to react. When you stop caring, you remove the fuel that once powered their influence over you. This detachment changes the dynamic entirely. You are no longer chasing their approval, defending yourself, or trying to meet their expectations. You exist independently of their validation. That clarity and steadiness create a boundary that they cannot easily penetrate. Your silence or calmness communicates something more powerful than words, your emotional sovereignty. For the narcissist, this is deeply disorienting. They are confronted with irrelevance, something they are psychologically unprepared to handle. They may escalate, attempt to reclaim attention, or move on to find new sources of validation. But none of these actions affect your internal state. By maintaining detachment, you force them to confront the limits of their control, and you protect yourself from the cycle of manipulation that once held sway. Ultimately, your indifference is transformative. It ends the game without drama, restores your sense of self, and shifts the power back into your hands. You are no longer a participant in their narrative. You are the observer, the one who decides the terms, and the one who chooses freedom over manipulation. That is the real power that narcissists fear the most. At the heart of dealing with a narcissist, the most profound shift happens the moment you stop caring. This isn't about revenge or cruelty, it's about reclaiming your emotional power. When you detach, you remove the fuel that once kept their ego thriving, and that absence shakes them in ways that words or confrontation never could. They scramble, they escalate, they attempt love bombing, manipulation, and provocation, but nothing penetrates your calm. Your indifference becomes a mirror, reflecting the limits of their control and exposing the fragility beneath their bravado. Understanding the patterns behind their behavior, the panic at losing validation, the strategic re-engagement, the anger, jealousy, and narrative distortion allows you to see these actions for what they are: self-serving attempts to protect a fragile ego. They are not a reflection of your value, nor an indicator of lingering feelings for you. Once you internalize that, you stop personalizing the chaos, stop reacting emotionally, and start observing with clarity. The ultimate power lies in your steady detachment. You no longer chase approval, defend yourself, or participate in their manipulations. Instead, you define your boundaries, protect your emotional space, and create stability where once there was turbulence. Their attempts to regain influence become irrelevant because your energy is no longer accessible to them. Stopping caring doesn't mean being cold or unkind. It means choosing yourself. It means understanding that the game is theirs, but freedom is yours. And in that freedom, you regain clarity, peace, and the psychological upper hand, the very thing a narcissist fears most.